Okay, so Helionox has a stack of cards to build. Whenever backs are available, I do choose to do them. It's always nice to have, I don't know if you can see them, little cut marks. And these cut marks actually, you can see the differentiation in the cards from top to bottom, but from side to side you can't. These are the best kinds of cut marks because if when you connect the pages they're slightly misaligned, it doesn't have too negative an impact on the overall backs of the cards. Some people choose to make sure when they do their cuts that the backs are perfectly aligned and the fronts, if they're a little bit off, no big deal. I really like the fronts of the cards to look good, so I tend to align and cut by the front. Now, every single pair is going to look exactly the same, so I'll just go through how I'm going to line these up, and then I might do a fast forwarded version of the video. So I've got the fronts and the backs here, and these need to be attached in such a way that the front and the back line up. Now to do that, I actually have a light table that I use. Unfortunately, it is presently unplugged. I'm in the process of moving my game making office space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align them off screen, and then I'm going to... Oh no, actually, I don't even have to align them off screen. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to align it by the cut marks on the sides. So on the front of the page, I'm going to cut off the left side and the top. To make sure that it aligns with the back, I'm going to cut off the right hand side and the top. So all of the fronts, I'll remove the left and the top. All of the backs, I'll remove the right and the top, so that when they get put together, I'm going to spray glue them and I'm going to line up this side of the sheet. Now, I generally find that as long as I am very careful when I am lining them up when spray gluing, that generally means that all of the cards are within about a millimeter of being correctly lined up. If there's anything that looks glaringly obvious as an error, then I'll trim the individual cards. So there are ways certainly that I could ensure that all of the cards are lined up appropriately. If I cut off an entire strip of cards, line these up separately, line these 6 up separately, they're far more likely to be aligned appropriately. But I don't find that the time investment in doing such a thing is worth it for me personally. So I just line up all 9 cards by one edge. So that is what I'm going to do. All right, so I've got everything cut I'm going to line up the fronts and the backs. I am going to spray glue them together. So let's go down to the spray glue area. Okay, so I'm not sure if I've mentioned it someplace else in the video at this point because I am splicing together lots of different instances. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the cards before I spray glue. In specific, I have two different kinds of paper that I use for the cards. The fronts, the bit that you typically look at, is made out of 65-pound cardstock, and the backs are made out of 24-pound paper. Together, when they're spray glued, they combine to make a really nice weight card that is sort of nice in hand. So when I go through this spray gluing process, I spray glue specifically the 65-pound piece, and then I lay on top of that the lighter weight paper. The reason I do that is because if you kind of get overzealous and overspray the light paper, it can bleed through. It's possible. Again, you'd have to be very heavy-handed for it to happen, but in my earlier days, I did have that occur. So I always spray the thicker of the two papers, and then what I'm going to do is, once it's sprayed, I'm going to take it off to the side, I'm going to lay it down, and I'm going to take the unsprayed lightweight piece of paper, line it up, and drop it onto the sprayed paper. So that's going to be my process. I'm just going to show it with these 4 sheets, and then not as a part of the film because it's kind of a pain to do. I'll do the rest of the many cards that we cut together a minute ago. So these 4 I'll spray. So this is the 65-pound paper, and just like with the board, we're gonna just put a nice even coating of the spray on there. If at any point I feel like I've missed any of the corners as I'm spraying, I'll just give that another shot. These look pretty good, but I'll get that top corner just in case. All right, so at this point, I'm gonna grab each one of these pieces of paper and I'll lay them down, and I'll put the corresponding lighter weight paper on top of it. Okay, I'm also remembering that it's this side that I have trimmed the front to. So when I grab the back piece, I know that I'm going to be laying it down like this because this is the trimmed side. I don't know if I can get closer. Lining it up it's probably the worst part of the whole thing. So I tend to lay my thumb right down onto the sticky paper so that it does not move, and grab with my finger at the other side to get that corner lined up, and then I'm going to gently lay it out along the edge, but I'm not going to stick it all the way down because I also want to make sure the top is as aligned as possible. So I'm going to get an eye on that and gently press that into place. So now my top is looking pretty good, my side is looking pretty good. I'll press out the rest of it. So that is one sheet that's going to have to get cut into cards, but it's done for now. I want it as far away from the overspray from the rest of the cards, which is happening to the right, so I'm going to put it all the way over to the left. All right, my next one. I think my least favorite part of P&P is making the cards, and I mean, I like having them done, and I like the final product, but making them is just sort of a time-consuming and sticky process that just kind of a pain. So I'll put that off to the side. Another thing that you might consider is just double checking to make sure that you have indeed laid it out correctly. I know that this side is the cut one, and I know that this is the back that goes along with it, but something to consider double checking. All right, again, sticking down with my thumb so that the paper doesn't go anywhere. Get my thumb in kind of. Get that edge. Check the top. Looks real good. Press all the air out into away from the two seams that you just took care of. Throw that away. And my final of the 4, I've got a blank space here, so I'm praying that I laid this out correctly. I do, I've got my blank space there, so I know that this is the correct back. I got my thumb down. Line up that corner. My top was a little bit off, so again, I just used the little give of the paper and it did move it up, and that is because I held off. I didn't push this down until I got those 2 edges taken care of. So that's it. Those are the 4 that I'm doing for this section. I'm going to do the rest of the stack off camera, and then we'll move forward to getting these cut into card shape. Okay, so at this point, I have spray glued the front and the back sheets together. Everything is sealed. We're ready to turn these into cards. Now, I'm gonna be very particular about how I do this. Through lots of trial and error, I have discovered that the following technique is very effective to keep things as organized and the least amount of work as possible. Each one of my sheets has a spare bit of white along the top. What I'm going to do is I am going to first cut the rows apart, but I'm going to make sure that I do not slice all the way through this particular white band. So I'm going to have 3 frillies, and then from there I'm going to cut along what is the verticals. So to start with, I'm going to trim these guys off. On the end, I can actually cut all the way through for this particular card because I've got little cut marks for each one of the rows and columns. In my opinion, this is one of the best techniques that print and play creators can do for their audience. Make those little cross marks. Don't go all the way through. Sometimes if things don't get cut appropriately, that's very visible and you have to trim down. These little cross marks are the absolute best. Even though I have trimmed off that bottom, I still have the little cross mark to be able to cut sideways. So print and play makers of the world, unite. Use those little cross hatches. You're doing all of your builders a favor. Now at this point, again, I'm lining up the little cross marks. There's one in each section of card. So I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to cut all the way through this white. I'm going to leave a little bit of that piece to go. All right, so that's that. I want that there because it's going to help me do my next round of cuts. Same thing for this one. Line up the cross marks. Make the cut, but don't go all the way through the white. Now it becomes clear why I did that. I have to cut through along what is the vertical, and as long as I squeeze these cards together, because the white piece is keeping the whole sheet together, I don't have to do extra cuts. I don't have to worry about it sliding around. So I'm gonna, now those 3 cards are ready to go. This is an example of where the magnetic sheet is particularly nice. I can lay these magnets down, and the next cut that I make, the paper isn't going to slide and give me a wonky cut. So those magnets will sort of hold it in place. And it didn't slide. So those guys are ready. And now finally, the last one, and I'm making use of all of the little cut marks and the edges of the cards as I go. And it doesn't matter that that slides away because I know that the ruler is keeping track of the cards for me. So that's my extra leftover little bit garbage. I'll put that off to the side. I'll slide these guys over. Keep my magnets just in case. And now I've got these cards that are ready to, and you'll notice I did not cut perfectly. Some of them look pretty darn good, but some of them don't. They've got that little white band at the bottom. Now I'm going to address that now. Any of the cards that seem like they need a little bit of trimming, usually I would wait to the end and do it with all of them, but since this is an instructional video, I'm going to deal with them now. So I have this little guillotine trimmer. It's made by Creative Memories. All of the tools that I make use of generally are coming from the scrapbooking world. Those ladies and gents that scrapbook have got the right idea when it comes to tools. So I'm going to take my card that needs trimming on the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to line it up on the little mini guillotine trimmer, and now that card is ready to go. I have a larger guillotine trimmer off to the side there. I find that that is pretty, it's actually strong enough to cut through mat board very clean. I've got a light as well to be able to see through paper, but I feel like jobs where these little cards needs trimming, the mini guillotine trimmer is definitely the way to go. So just trimming all that white off, and I find that despite the fact that I'm trimming the white off, it really doesn't make the cards unaligned. In fact, that's really the amount of paper that I'm trimming off. So it doesn't make too big of a difference. So I think those cards are pretty good. I'll grab this one along the side. And this whole step presumably would be avoided if I took my sheets and instead of aligning all 9 along 2 edges, I have in the past sliced off and lined up two separate sheets from the 9. But again, I just find that with the guillotine trimmer, it goes pretty quickly. It finishes off the cards. They end up looking really nice. They're pretty much the same size, and then I'm gonna corner trim these at the end. So for now, we'll go into super speed mode, and I'll trim off the rest of these cards. This is the last sheet that I am trimming. Generally, when there's this many cards in a game, I'll sort of break it up, do 5 sheets, do another 5 later. But I really I thought it would be cool to sort of see in the video at 4, 6, or 8 times speed what it looks like to do all of them at once. I do not advise this for anybody. My feet kind of hurt. I'm tired of cutting stuff. I really want to break. I'm super happy I'm on the last one. All right, here it is, last cut. All right, so now at this stage, I have a pile of cards, which would be fine at this point, I could certainly choose to sleeve these. I don't. A lot of people do. That is a good way to keep your cards safe. Because I sprayed them earlier, I know that fingerprints really aren't going to bug them too much. I've never spilled anything on my cards. They may have touched dampness. Certainly not a puddle or anything like that. But they hold up really nicely to use when you've sprayed them and used the Super 77. I like to touch the cards. I use that linen paper. You can see the sheen to it on purpose because I want to feel that. I really don't like sleeves terribly much at all. So at this point, to finish off my cards and give them that extra boost of awesome, I actually have to go through and I have to round the four corners of every card in this pile. So while it's going to look absolutely fantastic, when it's done, the art on this particular game is really, really nice. While it's going to look great when it's done, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of corner trimming to get it to complete. In fact, this is, for me, I've made a lot of games, and this is probably as tall a stack of cards as I've ever made. So it's gonna be actually really, really horrible to do my corner rounding with the Oregon Laminations hand cutter. Now I actually do have, in addition to the Oregon Laminations, let me see if I can pull it out. I've got this. It's called an Achilles Diamond 1, and it's got a sort of piece in it. I've got two different die cuts, one for 1/8 inch and one for 1/4 inch. I find actually that the 1/4 inch cutter is very consistent, and it will do a stack of cards no problem in seconds. Just push it down and it's done. Unfortunately, I find that the 1/8 die for it doesn't work particularly well, and I really prefer the size of the 3mm that I get on the handheld one. And for the sake of the cards looking really good, that's what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the corners on each one of these cards. And you saw earlier in the video, I did the corners for the board. I used this tool for not only the paper overlay on the board, but the mat board as well. It goes pretty quick once you get into a rhythm, but there's no way that I'm going to do all of these cards all in one go. This is definitely it's a kind of a heavy sort of tool, and as a result, fatigue sort of sets in relatively quickly for me. Plus, I don't really want to invite carpal tunnel into my life, so I'm just going to do another couple of these, and then I'm going to take a break, and off camera, not on video, I'm going to go ahead and kind of take my time throughout the day cutting the rest of the corners. In the next part of the video, I think I'm going to have to worry about how exactly I'm going to do the chits for the game. I saw a preview video. These actually look like nice thick pieces of plastic in the actual game itself. I know for sure that I want to do them round, and I'm thinking either attach them to mat board and use an arc punch to punch them out so I have nice thick chits, or punching them out and putting them on round pieces of wood. So I've done that in previous games. I might do that. I'm not even sure what these are, if they're VP points or credit tokens. If they're credits, I might go ahead and substitute in some other pieces. At this point, I have finished the game board itself, and I have cut and corner rounded all of the cards in the set. My next step in terms of crafting is to put together the rule book. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a couple of tools. The first one, this is a Martha Stewart scoreboard, and these grooves, along with I think this is usually called a bone folder because it used to be made out of bone. This one's just plastic. The grooves in combination with this particular scoring tool allow me to fold the pages without any of the wonky creases that can happen if you try to do it by hand. So I'm going to do this bit first. I have printed out the sheets. This is legal paper. And so the length of it is 14, which means that I'm going to have to use the 7-inch mark to do the folds. When I use the scoring board, I'm going to indent into the paper, which means that I want to indent so that it folds this way. So I'll just grab each one of my sheets of paper, flip it over, score it, and then fold it up. Looking to make sure that I'm doing this right. Okay, so that's 2. It doesn't matter if you score it upside down or not. It'll fold either way. It's just a little bit easier to fold it in this direction as opposed to in this direction when you score it. And again, I know where the middle is, give or take, within a matter of millimeters because I know it's a 14-inch long piece of paper. So at this point, I've got everything scored. I'm going to fold them out. And even though I've scored it, I'm still going to make sure that I line up this top bit. So I've got that set. Now, I think you're going to be able to see, despite the fact that I scored it in the middle of the 14 inches, there's still a little bit of overlap where the pages do not align perfectly. And that's certainly going to happen the thicker your book is. Those inner pages get pushed out, and so they create sort of an incomplete looking edge. So I'm going to address that momentarily, but before I do so, I'm going to staple the book together, and I'm actually going to fold up my board so that it's out of the way. I don't want to create any dents in it. Right, so the next bit, this is a swing line long reach stapler. It allows me to get right to the center of the page. Pages just slide right in there like that. It takes a little bit of practice to get the staple in the right spot, and even to this day I don't necessarily align it perfectly. Yeah, you can see I kind of goofed up and it's a little bit off center there. Sometimes if I've done it really off center, I'll pull out the staple and redo it. See if I can get this one a little bit better. Doing this left-handed because of where the camera is positioned. So I'm going to advise that you stick with whatever your dominant side is. That one's a little bit closer to the center. So at this point, I've got my book stapled, pages are in place, and I'm going to finalize off this edge. So to finalize the edge, I'm going to use my Premier guillotine cutter. I particularly like this model because it is strong enough to go through mat board or many layers of paper, and it leaves a nice clean edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the furthest back sheet across the edge of the cutter, and I'm going to trim it right down. In fact, I'm looking at the booklet itself, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball the same amount of white on the right and the left. I'm going to make use of the black grid lines on the page to make sure that I'm entering it at a right angle. Okay. And I think that's pretty good. So this particular cutter has this press down. It holds it in place and keeps it nice and tight. So there, now I know that edge is nice and clean. There's no extra on the front and the back. And the last thing I'm going to do to finish off this book is I'm going to round these corners. I think that makes it look really nice. So I'm going to head over here. I think I mentioned in an earlier video that I have the Achilles Diamond 1. It has a die cut in it for a corner rounder at 1/4 of an inch. I particularly like this to do stacks of pages because it makes a nice clean cut, and it goes through a lot of layers really quickly. So you can see that that corner is nice and round now versus the original 90-degree angle. So I'll do the other one. And now my book is complete. I did print this using a laser printer. I have an HP color laser printer. I tend to like the way that the laser prints out better than an inkjet, so if it's something that you can invest in and afford, I recommend it. So at this stage, I think almost all of the crafting is done for the game. When I get the tokens in the mail, I might add in little bases if it's something that I feel like needs to be displayed in a video form. I'll addend on a third Helionox video. So as it stands, board, book, and cards, I'm almost ready to play.